If you use Ableton Live for tracks on stage, then you need to be using sends and returns to route your audio. Hey, this is Will Doggett. Today I want to show you why you shouldn't be routing audio directly from tracks or using groups to route your audio, but why you should be using sends and returns. So let's get started. Typically, I've always thought of sends and returns from the perspective of a studio, right? I have a vocal and I want to use parallel processing to add a reverb to my vocal, but keep the vocal clean, right? So I'll add a reverb to the return track and I'll turn up my send knob to send a little bit of the vocal to the return track to hear reverb on my vocal. About a year and a half ago, I was teaching and it's kind of suddenly dawned on me why sends and returns I think are the perfect solution for live performance. So I want to try to show you why that is. Now, the reason I've been using sends and returns for audio routing is because I have 5 primary goals when it comes to routing audio live for live performance. One, I need to be able to send multiple outputs out of my Ableton Live set from my interface. So for instance, I want to separate my bass from the pad sounds and my percussion from the pad sounds. So when the sound engineer, she goes to turn up pads, suddenly you don't get shaker blaring through the house. So I need the ability to have multiple outputs from my interface. 2, even though I'm doing multiple outputs and using my interface, I need it so that when I don't have my interface connected and I open my file up, I can still hear audio and I don't have to go back through each of those individual tracks and reroute my audio. That's an absolute bummer when that happens. 3, I want to make sure that I can set my routing per track, per song, and do it one time and I never have to do it again so that I can take that song, drag it into my set and my routing's already done. 4, I want a way to easily control the volume of my song. Now, one of the things I hear from people all the time is I build my set, how do I get my volumes where they're similar or the same, or really quickly adjust the volume? I need a way to quickly reach up, grab a fader, and pull the volume of my song down. I personally don't like using clip volume to adjust that, selecting clips and adjust it, so I always want a fader. And then 5, I want a way that, so if I want to suddenly add a new bass track to my song, or I want to add a couple more guitar tracks to my song, I could just quickly drag those in and I don't have to expand a group and try to drag those into that specific group. So with those 5 needs for audio routing for live performance, I've found that sends and returns are the best way to make that happen. So let me show you how to set up your files for sends and returns and show you how you can accomplish those 5 things. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I have my file open up. And the very first thing you need to do to format your file to use sends and returns is add enough return tracks for your audio interface. Now, think of the outputs that your audio interface has and add a return track for those outputs. So in this case, if you look at my return tracks here, I have 12 return tracks set up for my Play Audio 12. Now, you could do this 2 ways. One, you could create a return track for each of your outputs, just as if they're mono outputs. Or if you're going to send some audio in stereo groups, stereo pairs, then maybe you just create enough for stereo pairs or a couple mono. So for instance, instead of maybe 12 return tracks, if I'm going to do 6 stereo pairs, I would just create 6 return tracks. If you're going to do things in stereo pairs, I would suggest doing it that way. For the sake of this though, I just have 12 separate return tracks. So if you don't see your return tracks, make sure you click the R down here in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. And to add a return track to Ableton Live, you could go up to the Create menu and do Insert Return Track, or do Alt-Option-Command-T, and that's going to add a return track to your set. So now with enough return tracks to equal outputs on our interface, again, considering and thinking of stereo pairs, I'm going to actually press that R button again to close down my returns. And I'm going to press S to show my sends. So what I'm going to do, I have all my stems, all my groups, all my tracks grouped into one group. And what you can see I've already done is I've gone through and I've turned up a send knob based on what output I want to send that track to. So for instance, I have this one going to track A, or return track A rather. This one's going to return track B. This one's going to C, to D, so on and so forth. Now you can see for tracks 12 and 13 here, I have them both going to G. So I don't have to have these separated out. For instance, all your guitars should probably be in one guitar group instead of sending lead down a separate output, rhythm down a separate output. I could group those together. And the way that I do that is just turn up the send knob to send them both to the same return track. Hopefully that makes sense for you. So now that I've done this, I've basically made the decision beforehand, what output do I want my return tracks to go to? And I'm good there. Now I have all my stems grouped. That's one of my favorite things to do, so that whether my song has 18 stems or 24 stems, it's just gonna live there at the bottom of my track the way it's formatted. So it ends up just looking like this, right? I don't need to see those individual files. I just want one group track. On the group though, here's one of the things I do so that I can accomplish two things. One, if I unplug my audio interface, I can still hear my audio output. And two, so that I have control over the individual song volumes. When I group my songs together, what I'm gonna do is in the audio output side of this, instead of this going by default to external out 1 and 2 or going to master, I change this so that it goes to sends only. And what that means is it's gonna take the audio from those tracks and send those to the return tracks. But the extra added benefit here is this volume fader here controls the overall volume of every single one of those tracks in that group. Let me show you what this looks like. Now, if I press play and let's open our return tracks here. So you can see the individual parts going to each individual return track, right? So I have that separation so that I could get those to multiple outputs. But now, and you can see this signal is pretty hot here. So let's close our return tracks down. And if I pull this volume down, and let's pull our click down, which is separate over here. Let's pull our volume down for this song and let's open our return tracks again, and you'll see that volume is decreased. Now, if I go over here again and turn it up, you'll see our volume increases, and then you can hear that go down and decrease. So what this gives me, again, is those multiple outputs. It gives me control over my song volume. It allows me to create my routing once, so it's saved. And if I unplug my audio interface, all of these outputs that are routed here, audio 2, right now they're to master. I'll show you in a second how to send them to separate outputs. All of those would disappear and I wouldn't be able to see them. But in order to hear them again, all I would do is go to this audio 2 section here and do external out or change this to master so that I can hear really quickly. Now with our return tracks loaded in, I'm actually not going to route my returns to outputs here in this file. And the reason is I have a template that I've pre-made. And in that template, let's open it up so we can take a look. In that template, I've created the same amount of return tracks and I pre-routed those return tracks to outputs on my interface. So for instance, if I hit R here, you could see my routing's already done. So I plugged in my Play Audio 12 before I started programming this session, these songs in this set, and I went ahead and routed each one of my return tracks to outputs on my interface. So that's done and that's good to go. Now, in order to do that, all you do is do audio 2, do external out, and then select the output on your interface to make that happen. Now, here's kind of a pro tip. This is one, don't tell anybody this. This is one of my favorite tricks. If you don't have your interface connected to your computer to do this, here's how you could do this really quickly. You can go and install the free utility Soundflower. There's also, it's kind of hard to find Soundflower sometimes and download. If you can't find that, I'll paste a link to that below in the description to grab it. If you can't find that, you can use the plugin Loopback from Rogue Amoeba, which is a great plugin. I use it for webinars all the time. It's kind of like the IEC driver, but for audio. You can route audio from one program to another program on your computer. You can download the free demo. You don't need to buy it to do this. But what I'm gonna do is go into Preferences, Command, Comma. I'm gonna go to Audio Output Device here. I'm gonna select, let's go ahead and do Soundflower. I've got this installed and I'm gonna choose the 64 output option here. Now with this selected in output config, I'm gonna go ahead and just enable up to my 12 outputs and I'm gonna hit OK. And now when I go back into my live set and do external out, you see 12 output options are available to me. Even without my interface connected, I have those 12 output options available. So I can sit in my office, I can sit in my studio without my Play Audio 12 connected and get my routing done in my template beforehand. Now, when I'm ready to listen to it again, I'll go back to built-in output. And the way Ableton Live works, it doesn't say you've routed to output 7 on Play Audio 12. It just says you've routed to output 7 on your external output device. It doesn't matter what interface it is. So that's how we use that Soundflower trick. Now, let me show you again, one of my favorite reasons for using sends and returns. It's because I previously in that single song file, I did all my routing so that now when I drag it into my template, everything automatically is gonna route to outputs. So I'm gonna go over here to my browser and I found this song and I'm just gonna drag this live set directly into this set here. And you see that group track comes along with it. And if I expand that group, let's hide our return tracks here for a moment. You'll see there's all our files. Let's show our sends. All those sends, all those routings that I made previously are automatically set to go to the return tracks that we did earlier. And again, this is in my template. So I don't have to redo my audio routing each time I build a set, no matter where my songs are coming from, because I formatted my songs the same, because I use sends and returns. When I drop that file in, that routing carries over with it. So now again, one of my favorite things about this is the ability to reach over and have an actual fader that adjusts the entire volume of that song. And as I have multiple songs in my set, I get a fader for each of those songs. So it's easy for me in line check or sound check to press play, listen to each song really quickly, and just adjust the volume based on that song without having to go in and adjust volume based on clips or go through each individual group and adjust the volume for that. So if you are using tracks on stage and you want to accomplish the same 5 goals I have, to use an audio interface for multiple outputs, to be able to hear your audio even when you disconnect your interface, to route your audio one time and have it carry over with your set, to have a volume for each one of your songs, when you build a set that you can really quickly reach up and grab to adjust. And then finally, to be able to add a new stem in and just quickly get that routed to the same output. Again, that's why I would encourage you to go and use sends and returns the same way I have shifted to using. Now, if you're watching all this and you go, great, this is great, but what audio interface should I use? How many outputs should I get from my audio interface? I put together a free gear guide that I'd love to share with you. You can get it for free by heading to fromstudiostage.com/gear. I'll talk about audio interfaces I suggest, MIDI controllers, what computer, what version of Ableton Live, everything you need to perform on stage with Ableton Live. So again, if you're interested in an upgrade or getting started completely from scratch, head to fromstudiostage.com/gear to check that out. Thanks so much for watching, guys. See you next week. Take care. Bye.